Good evening, everybody. I'm Chris Charbonneau. I am the associate publisher for SpinSheet magazine. Welcome back to another SpinSheet Happy Hour. Once again, returning to our Friday night time slot. Thank you very much for tuning in. And as we have in the past, we have our Mount Gay brand ambassador, Dario, is here to make us a drink. Dario, how are you?
Chris, I'm good, man. How have you been doing?
Hanging in there. Hanging in there. Summer's kind of winding down, and kind of ready for the fall.
That's right. Well, I guess this type of cocktail that I'm going to be making definitely gives you like a nice fall vibe. Something for a nice relaxed evening. So as always, I love to keep it super simple. And
Sure.
This evening we're going to be featuring the Mount Gay XO, which are rums matured for 5 to 17 years inside of the barrels. What's different about the XO is the fact that we actually utilize 3 different types of barrels and then blend them all together. So we're using a whiskey barrel, a bourbon barrel, and a cognac barrel. And we're taking liquids from each of those barrel types and bringing them all together to create this rum goodness, if you wanted to call it that. Yeah. So it gives you like a hint of citrus. It's very heavy on the palate. Just an overall really nice drink on its own. If you just wanted to sip that on its own, it's good. But in Barbados, we have a cocktail called the corn and oil, which is usually made with rum. You get like a really nice rum, a nice heavy-bodied rum, some falernum, which is like a spice liqueur, basically, from Barbados as well, along with some bitters. So in the spirit of not having any falernum on hand, because obviously I would have drank it all, drinking corn and oils, I'm going to be using some Luxardo Maraschino, which gives you like a cherry flavor with a slight bit of nuttiness as well. So that should still work pretty well as it relates to what it is that I want to do. So this particular cocktail is going to be utilizing just 1.5 ounces of the Mount Gay XO. I'm going to do 1 ounce of the Luxardo Maraschino liqueur, and I'm going to do about 3 dashes of some aromatic bitters. And this is a cocktail that we're going to be stirring. So I guess you would describe this as being like a more spirit forward cocktail versus a lot of the times when I come on, I'm usually shaking. But I decided to the name of the cocktail is a chilled night. And if you're stirring, it's a more chilled action. Shaking tends to be a bit more vigorous, but that's what we're going to be going with. And I'm calling the cocktail a chilled night. Yeah, so that's going to be fitting for anyone looking for something to just sit back, relax, and enjoy the SpinSheet show.
I like it.
Ask your Sailmaker. That's
right.
So we're gonna add 1.5 ounces of my Mount Gay XO. Then I'm going to be adding 1 ounce of my Luxardo. And the beautiful thing is as you're mixing, you already start to get all of the aromas pushing through. And it kind of intrigues you. Like, I'm wondering what are the flavor profiles going to be when this is completed. 3 dashes of bitters. Simple as that. I'm just going to add some ice. A few blocks of ice. Just going to give it a nice stir. Just move that so you can see. So I'm just going to give this a stir until the glass becomes a bit chilled, so I know that, okay, we're getting somewhere. You see what I mean? You can just like chat and stir and chat. There's no loud noises going on or anything like that.
I'm feeling very chilled now.
It's a very chilled night. All right. That's nice. So I'm just going to fill my glass with some ice right up to the top. I'm just going to strain it.
That looks delicious.
Smells amazing too. And just like that, you have yourself one chilled night.
That's a beautiful.
Once again, as I said, a very spirit forward cocktail. I mean, I went 1 ounce on the Luxardo. If you wanted to use a half ounce instead to get the rum pushing through a lot more, that can work as well. But I think what we did right here was really, really nice. We got the bitters complementing the nuttiness of the Luxardo, along with a bit of the fruitiness as well. The notes of the oak coming from the Mount Gay XO. Really and truly, simply put, we kind of have like a match made in heaven, but on earth, that type of vibe. So if you're looking for something simple, something chilled, fall is coming up. The chilled night is definitely for you. If you don't want to mix, you can just sit and sip your Mount Gay XO on its own, and you are pretty much good to go.
That's awesome. Thank you, sir. And if everybody, I know the recipe is there at the bottom. I'm going to turn that off, but it is actually at the top of the comments. So if you're interested, by all means, go into the comments and write it all down. Thank you, Dario. It's great to see you again.
Take care. Until next time. Bye.
All right. Cheers. All right. Let's bring on Molly and Dave.
Hi, Sharp. Happy Friday.
Hey, happy Friday. Hey, Dave.
Hello, Chris. How are you doing?
We're doing well. We're back to Friday.
We're back to Friday. It's nice to have Dave back on the show because I think you are our guest who's come back the most of every other guest we've had on, and we've had more than 50 episodes, and you've been on a handful of them. So we appreciate it.
For punishment.
Are you just like happy hour, right?
Yeah, it's true.
But it's fun to have Dario on because he's always fun. But then it's great to have Dave back too. So, Dave, what are you drinking over there? I hear you didn't have any Mount Gay in the house.
Well, now I'm really jealous because first of all, Dario had not just Mount Gay, but he had Mount Gay XO. And if you haven't had Mount Gay XO, it is a far superior thing.
Yeah.
Yes, you can drink it as a sipping rum, and that
doesn't last long in my house.
Yeah, and actually one of the reasons there's no rum in our house is we've been, in the spirit of late summer, we have been making a lot of peach daiquiris, just with fresh peaches and rum. There's not a little bit of lime, and away you go in a blender. And so our rum stocks were depleted. But so I was actually, at this time of the year, my thoughts often turn to Italy and to Sardinia because they're some of the best selling in the world, typically in September there. And I've been lucky enough to go there many times. And so I was drinking a Central Italian white, a Trebbiato, which according to the tasting notes, this is what really got me. It's a racy white, bursting with generous fruit flavors. So the racy part got me right away. But yeah, no, it's a good end of summer drink.
That's excellent. What are you having, Sharp?
I am having a Mount Gay and ginger, one of my faves. And you're having the same. All right. Well,
click up, Dave. I guess you got to go up to click up to the center there. Yeah.
The facial orientation of this thing is.
All right. Cheers.
Yeah. All right.
Cheers. Happy Friday.
Cool.
So we're just going to ask Dave questions tonight about sailing a little faster or racing a little faster. And Sharp, I guess you're going to go behind the scenes.
Yeah, I'll jump off, but I'll get any of the questions posted up there, so I'll see you in a little bit.
Great. Thanks, Sharp. And anybody who is just joining us, we have David Flynn from Quantum Sales on here, and we're going to ask him questions. You can put a question in the comments at any time. We're pretty much going to answer them as they come in, unless it's something it's already on my list and we're getting there. So, but feel free to put any questions, anything you'd ever want to ask your Sailmaker into the comments. And so, David, you have been on the show a number of times before, and every time I've asked you how you got into sailing, and I can tell everyone how you got into sailing. You didn't come from a yacht club family. You started a little later in life. You went all the way in. So tonight I decided let's just not ask you that question. Instead, why don't you tell us what a Sailmaker really does?
Well, there's a couple of phases to that question, because there are what I call real sailmakers, and the people that actually build sails. They're actually a master sailmaker who's spent a lot of time at it, and you can fix and make and do anything like that. They're a fairly rare commodity, actually. And they're usually behind the scenes, right? They're the ones actually building stuff. And the sailmaker and we're fortunate at Quantum to have a number of what I consider master sailmakers who I don't know what they do back there sometimes, but it all comes out right. The sailmaker that most of us are used to seeing face forward are people like me who sell stuff, right, and try to help you out with things. And so we're a little bit of a different breed, and some of us come from a pure sailmaking background. And have been on our hands and knees in times like that. I mean, Jason Curry at our loft he is actually in New Zealand. You can apprentice as a sailmaker, and it is you go through a multi-year career or a training program to get to this career level. We don't have that in the United States, but Jason is someone who sells sails and also is a really, really fine master sailmaker. I'm not. They usually, whenever I get too close to a sewing machine, it's like, whoa, hang on, Dave. That'd be fine. I kind of come at the thing from the pure sailing end of, I got into it because I wanted to race sailboats, and I couldn't find any other way to do it and make some kind of living, no matter how meager. And that was the outlet for me. And so for a sailmaker, from my perspective, is someone who really spends a lot of your time teaching, right? I mean, that's also what I came from. Before I was a sailmaker, I taught sailing and worked at Steve Colgate's offshore sailing school and things like that. And it did a lot of coaching. And that I found when I actually went to work, you spend a ton of time with people on their boats. And what you do for them more than anything else is you're giving a lesson in a lot of ways, way, shape, or form. So that was where I sort of came into it. And obviously I was fascinated by sail design and materials and construction. And I did get into the technical end of things along the way. But mostly I just came into it because I like sailing and I like teaching people about sailing. And so that was the sailmaking from my perspective.
Mm-hmm. So I think you already answered my second question, in that there are sort of two tracks to sailmakers, the ones who really know how to make the sails and the ones who sell them. But were all of them one and the same at one time? Or did that evolve into the, sort of sailboat racers needing kind of an onboard coach, or did that evolve with technology, or just wonder how that worked?
I think way back when there were lots of mom and pop sailmakers, when everybody built, even if you were part of a bigger organization, you were making sails on the spot. There was a lot of hands-on sailmaking. I mean, you started out cutting numbers or, putting draft stripes on and that kind of thing. And that was the typical way that you sort of work towards selling sails. That has changed over time as the emphasis has gotten to be more, what you love if I was writing a job application for someone who wanted to be in the sailmaking industry, you have to be, ideally you do have to have super strong sailing skills. Because you are going to be on people's boat where they are going to put their faith in you and your competence and what you know how to do. And so strong sailing skills with good communication skills, that liberal arts degree, you didn't think it was worth anything, but it actually is, when you can talk and write, that really helps. That communication side of it is another strong stretch. And then you do need some, I wish I had more pure hands-on sailmaking time and skills, really, because it is nice to be able to look at something and go, no, this is what's going on here, and this is how you fix it. And I've accumulated that by osmosis over a lot of years. But what we try to do now at Quantum anyway is we try to balance those two things off, where we say, okay, you need a certain amount of hands-on experience actually making sails or fixing sails anyway, knowing how they go together and all that stuff. You need some hands-on just nuts and bolts stuff of, how do you measure a boat, and, how does this sort of mainsail handling system work, and all those, mundane questions that you're going to be answering for people that take some accumulated knowledge on the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then ultimately you want to be able to have the skill set that puts them on the water with a client, and you can put them there and make somebody have a good impression of them. So we try to do, kind of monitor both tracks at the same time. But it was a free for all when I was starting into it, and the industry's clearly changed a lot over the last several decades.
Yeah, I just one more question about being a sailmaker before we jump into our sailors' questions to you. Do you train, are you training the younger generation to do it too? And before we hopped on, you were saying that you sort of felt like you were, you were in the sunset part of your career as a filmmaker. Are you training the younger guys, or do they just sort of figure it out on their own?
Yeah,
How to be with customers on their boats anyway. Obviously they know how to sail, but
we've made a conscious decision to try that, because one of the things that's happened in our industry is a lot of people from my generation are aging out of the whole thing. And so where are the 20-something-year-olds coming into the whole deal who can, do the same thing we did? And that's why we have tried to glom on to some of the people that we feel like have the right skill set, have the strong sailing skills, are good communicators, put them through the nuts and bolts of working on the floor so they understand what sailmaking is, and then at the same time have them work with the salespeople we already have and going on to go up with me to go sailing with a client, or to go measure a boat, or to talk to somebody, or to work with Jason Curry or Andrew Waters or one of our more experienced people, so they get the sales side of the equation too. But yeah, we're trying to train. It's a hard thing. I mean, I know we're not just ourselves, but other sailmakers are in the same quandary of like, how are we going to get this next generation going? Fortunately, it's still a glamorous sport, and people got to go, oh, God, sailing, that's what I want to do forever. And of course, I always tell them to answer to that question, well, so you want to be a sailmaker? Okay. Well, one thing I would recommend is that you marry well, because that way, at least you don't have to, be financially constrained by, sailmaking is your only means of living. And that's, one of the wonderful things that I've been able to do is my wife, Melanie, has been fantastically supportive, not just, emotionally and all the rest of it, but, financially, because she makes the big bucks. So I can go play at being a sailor. So yeah, we're trying to train. We need people with that weird skill set, overeducated, underemployed.
Yeah. Well, I think it's probably the same in a lot of professions. Sometimes the best sailors aren't maybe the best at explaining it. So that's the hard combo to come by, right?
Yeah, a lot of great intuitive sailors. You're right; they're not natural teachers, so they can get on your boat and make it go fast for sure. But do they leave you with something that is memorable? I mean, for me, the best parts of my job sometimes are when I walk away from sailing with just a normal sailor, not a Grand Prix racer. They're usually a pain in the ass, actually, but the normal people who actually appreciate your time with them on the boat and come away and say, hey, wow, I learned more in 2 hours with going sailing with you than I've learned in the last 3 months. That makes you feel great. And that's what makes the job worthwhile.
Okay. Well, I have a bunch of questions for you, but we've already gotten a couple from the audience. So I figure let's take them. So Sharp, if you want to pop up Mark Burrow's question. We have a Dacron sail that has little threads starting to stream off our Genoa. They're not the sewed seams. What should I do?
Well, bring it to us or to another qualified sailmaker, because it sounds like that those threads are been exposed to enough UV where they are coming loose and something needs to be restitched. Stitching goes long before the fabric itself. It's the first thing that goes. And so over the life of a sail, normal maintenance, like changing your oil, is to come in and do some restitching. This probably is a polyester, or it's a Dacron sail. So, there's nothing too fancy about it, but yeah, putting a sewing machine on it, I'm putting some fresh thread, particularly on the leech of the sail where the loads are high. That's a standard maintenance item. Certainly, if you've got a UV cover, that's probably got threads hanging off it too. And so restitching is what you need.
All right. Mark had another question here. What do you do in annual sail servicing? Can I do it myself?
Probably not, because there actually are some nuts and bolts things that go on at any sailmaker when you bring your sail in, and for not only just you look at the whole thing, but things like restitching, or very often, depending on the age of the sail, maybe changing all the webs on the corners that hold the sail to the boat. looking at, chafe and wear and all that stuff. Unless you've got sewing machines and webbing and the tools to do it, it's a little tricky. If you've got all that, certainly you could. We have many clients who are good seamstresses and they can go ahead and have at it. But you got to have the right tools, and it can take a couple different sewing machines of different sizes and strengths and types. So it's probably easier to. I used to work on my car a lot, but it's gotten to the point where it's just easier to take it into the dealer and say, okay, have at it, because they got all the right stuff there.
We have a question from Regis, but he had a bit of a
he didn't mean a four-wheeler.
He meant a furler. But I like the furler question because that seemed like a creative one.
Yeah, and Reed is an old friend as well as a client, so I'm thankful to answer this one. So the rage these days is being able to furl your asymmetrical spinnaker, right? We can furl everything else. Why not a spinnaker? And so the equipment manufacturers, of course, have jumped on this bandwagon with both feet because it's like, wow, now we can sell some more stuff. And so there are a ton of furling systems on the market, from all the major manufacturers, from Harkin and ProFurl and Carver and KZ Marine and, all this stuff. And frankly, all the furling systems themselves are very good. That's not the problem. There's two problems with furling and asymmetrical. One is the torsional rope that gets used, right? So you're asking the sail to wind around a freestanding rope, or maybe one that's inside the luff of the sail. But it's basically, unlike your head sail furling system where there's a wire and aluminum extrusions and the whole thing turns as one unit, this thing's got to count on this cable not spinning on you. And if it spins on you, then the sail doesn't wrap up. So the cable's actually the important part and the expensive part. The furling system itself, it's a drum at the bottom with some sort of line mechanism and ball bearings, and some of them spin better than others, or you can argue about that. And there's a head swivel at the top, but they're all relatively good. There is a distinction between what's called a top-down furling system and a bottom-up furling system. So a classic system, the tack is fixed to the drum, and when you start to rotate that drum, the tack rolls up first around this torsional cable. The other type is a top-down, where the tack is actually floating. It spins when you try to rotate the cable, and the sail is lashed to the head, and so the head turns first. And the reason that's useful is because sails are hard to furl at the top. It's the width of the sail at the top that's hard to get rolled in. Unlike a Genoa, which doesn't have much girth up there, a Spinnaker does. And so a top-down furler is probably a better option for almost any asymmetrical. And then finally, there's just a limit. The wider and bigger the sail gets, the harder it is to furl on a repeatable, reliable basis, no matter what kind of system you use, no matter what kind of rope you use. So you have to be a little careful. Like once you get over a mid-girth that's, 85 or 90% bigger than the foot length, all bets are off. And it might furl well, but it's going to take more technique, and it's not going to be as reliable and consistent. So I wouldn't worry about the brand of the furler. I'd worry about the torsional rope that was being used with it, and I would be worried about the girth of the spinnaker. And when you had your Sailmaker design you want, how big is this thing going to be? Because if it gets too big, it's never going to be a reliable a furling unit.
You get pay the price for all that square footage, huh?
That's it. Yeah, and if you've got a racing crew and you can pull down on the sheet and get the leech tight as it rolls in, and even still there are still disasters all the time with these things. So they're not quite as foolproof as the manufacturers want you to believe. They take a little technique, and they definitely take a balance between sail size and your ability to furl it.
Mm-hmm. All right. So for anyone who's just joining in, we have David Flynn from Quantum Sails here, and he's answering our questions about sailing and racing and, in reference to our sails. So feel free to post a question in the comments. And but Dave and I chat a little beforehand, and I was asking him what some of the most common questions that he gets are. And he said that one of them is, how long does a sail last, and how do I know when it's past its prime?
Yeah, this is the age-old question, right? Because you get clients that come in and here my 15-year-old Genoa is doing great. Just patch her up, and then we'll send her out one more time. And then you get on the flip side of the equation, you get the racing sailor who, wow, it was going great at the beginning of the season, but my sail's got 50 or 60 hours on it now, and I'm not pointing as well as I was, right? So there are two very different measures of life of a sail. One is just, hey, how long is it going to remain intact as a triangle? And that's a relatively low bar, all right? I mean, that's, almost any sail is going to hang intact as a triangle, for a good long time. Years is a bad way to look at it, right? You have to think of sail life just like you do. You think of your car life in terms of years? No, you think in terms of miles. Well, the same thing for sail. I mean, how many hours you're putting on it really is a determination of what you should expect out of it. And for, on the cruising side of the equation, you'd expect to get 3,500, 4,000 hours of pretty good use out of a sail before things really started to go, south on you. Totally dependent on how much UV exposure. If you're down in the Caribbean, your sails last a couple of years, gone, right? The sun just eats them alive. If you're up in Maine and sail 3 months a year, and your boat's already out of the water because, hey, my God, it's September 10th or whatever. You're 15 years, no problem. It'll keep going forever. So that's the cruising side of the equation. But the reality of it is, the moment you put a sail up, the critical airfoil shape that we're trying to build into this thing to make it as the optimum upwind weapon starts to deteriorate. I don't care what you make it out of. You can make it out of unobtainium. It is still going to change its shape gradually, surely. You can't stop it. And that's why at the high end of the sport, on the Grand Prix level, you literally measure the life of sails in hours. And when you retire that sail, there's nothing wrong with it. It still goes up fine. And most people look at it and go, hey, it looks pretty good. But, when you're trying to eke out an extra boat length or two over the course of a 2-mile beat, then those subtle differences in shape make a difference. You notice the fact that the sail is getting a little bit fuller, which is what happens to all sails as they age, and that the position of that depth is moving as well. It's moving aft. It's, you have this knuckled forward straight off the back end sail that now is becoming deeper, but the whole back of the sail is getting rounder. And that makes your upwind performance suffer, right? And it makes the sail much harder to trim and sail close hauled upwind in a breeze. Reaching, it's probably not going to make much difference at all. Hence, cruising sailors kind of have a different bar for what they're willing to accept for shape holding, over time. But they suffer too. I mean, a cruising sail that's become too full and too draft aft, shape move the back of the sail, that just makes you heel over, right? And then you don't go upwind very well. So you have a different threshold than the racing sailor who says, oh my God, I'm as a boat length slow on this 2-mile beat. But you still have an important balance that will help you sail better and easier and keep your boat under control if you've got nice sail shapes. And so, typically even a cruising sail loses its shape life long before it loses its physical life as a triangle. It's going to go up and down and stay in one piece for years and years, but it may become so full and so round in the back end that it's not a very good sail anymore from a shaping perspective. And for some people, it doesn't make any difference, but for many, it does. And it's like when you put a new set of sails on with nice sail shapes, it's like dropping a new engine in your car. It just makes a huge difference in the whole thing. And you can tell, I mean, if you take a picture of your sail sailing upwind from the middle of the foot up to the head and tell us what kind of wind you're sailing in, 12 knots of breeze or whatever it is, and have it set up trimmed properly and get as much of the sail as you possibly can in the width of the sail, we can pretty much tell you real quickly, has that sail become too full? Is the draft too far aft? Can we fix something so we can reshape these things to a certain extent? So that's a digital photograph that digitized is worth its weight in gold in terms of figuring out whether your sail shape may be past its prime, even though the sail itself has remained intact as a triangle.
Yeah, I have to wonder, sometimes by the time that people ask you that question, does that mean they need new sails? If they're asking the question, they might already have a feeling.
Yeah, and they don't need to take a picture. So, there's other like key indicators, like for cruising sailors who have like in-mast furling mainsails that suddenly they can't roll them in or roll them out anymore. The sail's stretched out of shape and the sail's too full and won't go in and out of the mast anymore. That's just I can tell you that without even having to look at it. Yeah. But yeah, the difference between a brand new, nicely shaped sail and one that's got a lot of miles on it and is older, it happens subtly and slowly. So people, it still looks fine to me. And if it does, great, carry on. But a new sail with a nice sail shape is a wonderful thing.
Yeah. So one of the other questions you said comes to you all the time. How can I point better?
Yeah, this is my Monday morning quarterback thing. It's like, I come on in and I just wasn't pointing this weekend. It was terrible. I mean, everybody was just sailing higher than I was, which and making a boat go upwind is a tricky thing. There's a lot of stuff that's got to balance off, and so of course, first thing you need to know more, right? It's like, well, I can't point. Well, how much wind was there? Now that's because has a big impact on sort of how you set your boat up and your mode of trim and things like that. I mean, other things like, I was out there too, and which way did you go on that beat? I thought I saw you pretty far left, and the breeze went 20 degrees to the right, and if you weren't to the right, you got trounced. So some of it could just be positioning and tactical. It's hard to always say. If we weren't pointing, was there a boat right underneath you to leeward? I mean, that's always a struggle, right? It's like, oh my goodness, if somebody's right underneath there, then they're controlling your destiny, and you can't mode the boat the way you want. So you'll usually not point very well and tend to slide into them. So there's always some leading questions that need to be answered to flesh out that profile of why I'm not pointing. But in general terms, I think of a boat operating in three modes upwind. First is in light air. And in light air, the important thing about that to remember is don't try to point. There's a golden rule in sail trim that I don't know where it came from, but I mean, Bill Gladstone from Northview always had it in his book, and I thought it was spot on. I used to teach with Bill, and it was speed first, then try to point. Because unless you have water flowing past your blades, your keel, and your rudder, and you're developing lift and resistance off them, you're just going to go sideways. So you need to resist the tendency in light air to try to point and just work on going fast, keeping the sails eased, keeping the bow down, keeping things moving. And then only once you're going pretty well do you really try to squeeze it up. And even then, I'm always really, really careful. Don't get greedy. Don't try to sail too high in light air. So in light air, the rule is don't try to point. Because if you do, you're going to miss the basics that you need speed first before you can get away with that. The good time is in medium air, right? Because in medium air, I should be able to point well. My boat's now going up to speed, especially if the water's pretty smooth. It's pretty easy to get things going. Now I should be able to really trim the sails hard. I can trim them hard enough, as hard as I possibly can, to the point where the boat speed starts to crash or slow down. But I can usually get away with, and an overlapping headsail like a Genoa, almost on the spreaders. And, if I've got, non-overlapping jibs trimmed quite far inside, the main sheeted hard, and I can really squeeze the boat and work it in moderate conditions. I should be able to point. Again, I remember speed first, right? I don't go slow, and then I get the boat going. But then I try to squeeze as hard as I possibly can, and I definitely sail the boat on the higher edge of the groove. When you're in light air, if you're always sailing on the low edge of the groove, right? You're hedging towards the telltale streaming straight back, keeping the boat pressured up, making sure you're not having the inside telltale lift at all. Well, in medium air, now I can go into a mode where the inside telltale can lift all the time. And really, as it gets a little puffier, I can almost ignore the telltales. I can just sail by angle of heel. And sailing by angle of heel is what becomes critical in the third phase of the game, which is heavy air, right? Here, pointing, if I heel over too far, the boat's not going to go well upwind. That's just end of note. So I've got to control helm and heeling. They kind of go together. And so I've got to keep the boat on its feet, which means I've got to depower it. I can't sheet as hard as I once did. I almost have to go, in a certain respect, back to the way I was set up in light air, with the sails much more open and eased, and more twist and things and stuff like that. I start to think again about, I'm not going to try to point here. I'm just going to go fast, because the other thing that's going on is, as the breeze builds, you now have waves, and the waves are trying to stop the boat. So if you try to sail really, really high and tight, the boat's going to stop. So in breezier conditions, I like to sail more with the bow down, which means keeping the sails well eased. I am always sailing angle of heel. As a helms person, if I get a puff, I'm letting the boat come up a little bit to keep that same angle. If I get a little lull, maybe I can press some then. And I'm just trying to ramp my speed up, so when I hit those waves, I can just crush them. And if I see a set coming, and I'm working with my mainsail trimmer to say, okay, give me a little ease. We can bear off a little bit. I can hit those waves with a little extra pace and power and just go through them. So the three modes: don't try to point, go fast, work hard at pointing, trim everything like crazy and see what you can get away with. And then finally back sort of on the flip side is, now I'm going to start to go fast again. And I'm just going to not worry about height. I'm going to let that happen naturally. One thing about most modern boats is they have smaller and smaller underwater appendages. And so the faster you go, the better they work. And so you got to get that speed first thing going.
So just because we're Chesapeake sailors and we're used to light air, when you say, medium wind and you say heavy air, what are you talking about? What's your knot range for that?
Well, it's a bit relative, right? Because, you sail in San Francisco, 18 knots of breeze, kind of normal day. But I think of light air is anytime the crew's not on the rail fully hiking, right? So it's going to be under 8 to 10 knots of breeze, depending on how powerful your boat is. Medium conditions is when you've got everybody up and hiking, but it's still, you can control heel relatively easily, and it's still pretty easy to sail. So 8 or 9 to 14 or 15. Usually above 15, now control starts to become an issue. And heel really becomes an issue. So that's the time again to start opening things up and going faster, and not worrying about how high I'm pointed, but worry about, is my heel under control, and am I going fast? And then I'll worry about the pointing side of the equation later. So, under 8 to 9, 9 to 15 or 16, and then 16 or up, we're sailing in breeze on conditions.
Mm-hmm. All right, cool. That's all good stuff, Dave. The other question, and for anyone who's just joining us, because I see people come in and out of these things, but we are talking to David Flynn from Quantum Sails, and we're asking him questions about sailing and racing. Feel free to post your questions in the comments. Otherwise, I'm going to keep rolling through the questions that I have. So one of the questions you said that you get fairly regularly, Dave, main sheet or traveler? What's the best tool for controlling heel/power?
I've seen marriages break up over this question. So the answer is both. Okay, here's the thing. There's no one solution here. It's always got to be a combo solution thing. But to depower your boat and your mainsail specifically, if you drop the traveler, that's a nice thing because it essentially lets the sail's center of effort sort of rotate forward. And so you're not, as you pull a sail into the center line, all that effort is kind of just heeling the boat over. As you drop the traveler, that sort of frees it up and the effort rotates forward and it kind of releases things. But at the same time, the main sheet also has a huge impact on how powered up or depowered you are. Usually trimming the main sheet on means you're making the sail fuller and the leech tighter, and that's going to create power. And then easing the thing out is going to open up the leech and create twist, and that's going to depower the sail. So you need, of course, as in all things, this is a Zen-like question. We have to find the middle way, the balance between power in the mainsail, in the leech, and the control by the sheet, and then letting the whole sail in or out, which is what the traveler does. And some of this is boat dependent too. So some boats really dislike having the boom pulled right up on the center line of the boat. They just don't want to go. A CNC 31 design or an IC 37 is a classic example. You put the boom on the center line of the boat, and it's going to be tough to make it go as soon as you get in any kind of breeze. Because remember, now you're talking depowering. So what, 12 knots plus is, you got everybody hiking, and now it's starting to shed power. So other boats and a lot of fractional rig modern boats, you hardly play the traveler. You put it pretty close to the center line of the boat, and you just play the sheet to control the twist. I always look at it as if the traveler is sort of my gross tune, boom on the center line for maximum power pointing, but down as I want to depower. And then I get to the point where I can use small amounts of changes to the main sheet to keep the boat balanced and on its feet and going, because really your main sheet is going to be going in and out all the time when you're sailing upwind. Your mainsail trimmer is driving the boat. You're hanging onto the little stick or the wheel in the background, but they're calling the tune for you. So you guys need to be in sync with, okay, I'm trimming the mainsail and I'm looking at the speedo and I'm seeing we're a little slow, and we're heeling over a little bit too much, but so we want to press to build speed, but I'm already heeling too much. So what do I got to do? I've got to depower. So I think I'll drop the traveler a couple inches and use the main sheet to get the boat going. And then, all right, now the heel's okay, and we're getting up to speed, and let me try a couple of turns of main sheet on here and see if I can get away with that, and usually I end up finding a balance of where the traveler needs to be for that wind range, and then I'm just fine-tuning the main sheet in and out a couple of inches, unless it's super windy and puffy. Then you may be jumping gobs of main sheet out and then pulling it back in. But if the conditions are relatively stable, I can find a balance between those two things. And again, boat dependent, condition dependent to somewhat, but think of the traveler as sort of a gross tune, and think of the main sheet as more of a fine tune when you get into that mode.
And when you're finding that balance, is that something you're doing by gut feel, or are you looking at the speed instruments, or is it a little both?
It's definitely both. So good main trimmers are good drivers because they are driving the boat. Matter of fact, you'll see them, they're kind of hunched over. They're looking at the exact same thing as the driver is looking at. They're looking at the telltales. They're looking at the angle of heel. They're looking at the speed, and they're looking at if you've got a wind angle, what the wind angle is. And you're going to have targets, hopefully, at least on an instrumented boat, for in 12 knots of breeze, I should be going 7.3 knots at 38 degrees true wind angle. And so you can see all that, and you can feel right away when the boat's not getting up to speed, and then the numbers should reflect that. I mean, I use feel first, right? Basically the angle of heel and then how well the boat's going. And then I reference the numbers. I look at, okay, where is our speed relative to target? Where is our angle relative to target? Oh, it feels good and the numbers are good. I've got it. Yeah. Or, you know, hey, it feels good, but man, we're not going well. I mean, it's, as a helms person, you can, one of the things that both of you and the mainsail trimmer should be seeing is that is it a struggle to get up to target speed? Is my normal upwind speed, if it's easy to get up to speed, well, then I'm not trimming hard enough. if it's hard to get up to speed, then I'm probably over trimming you and not letting you release to the whole deal. So a mainsail trimmer should be using the exact same inputs as the driver: the angle of heel, the telltales, the boat speed, and the wind angle. All should be kind of circling around in your brain every moment as you look at what's going on.
Well, great. We have a couple of questions that have come in from the audience, and one of them is by Ron Chazinski. Thanks for joining us, Ron. For cruising sailboats, do you recommend full batten mainsails?
Absolutely. The thing about battens are structure, right? They're like when you build a house, it's nice to have a lot of frame. When you build a sail, it's nice to have a lot of battens to do that framing for you. They resist the compression that goes on in a sail. So battens do two things, basically. They support the area outside the straight line between the clew and the head, what's called the roach, all that area. So the more roach you have, by the way, the more important battens become. That's why, like on a catamaran main or something, you've got lots of them, and they must be very stiff. The other thing that the battens do is when you pull down on your main sheet to trim the sail end, or down in the boom with the vang or whatever, though the leech tries to move towards the luff, right? The sail tries to compress, and when it compresses, it essentially becomes rounder and fuller, right? Just really when you don't want it to become rounder and fuller. You want it to stay flat in that airfoil shape. So battens do a lot to help control the shaping of the sail as long as they're appropriate stiffness. If the battens aren't stiff enough, then they're useless, and so good battens are important as well. But the only downside to fully battening a sail, and by the way, there's a couple other upsides. I mean, they reduce the rate of flogging, so the material hangs in there better. They make it easier for sail handling systems to work. A sail that comes down into between lazy jacks that's supported along its whole length drops much nicer under the boom than one that, it does not have those. But the downside is those battens and that compression goes forward, and it goes forward against the slides. And so the bigger the boat, the worse the problem, right? But those slides, when they're under the pressure of the battens, can actually want to twist and toggle in whatever groove setup you have, and actually want to lock up. So the sail becomes maybe difficult to raise and lower. And that's a real problem. And also the batten wants to push past the edge of the sail. So it can be a source of chafe and wear, and what we call push past, where the batten pushing far enough where there's actually a crease of fabric fold underneath where it's pushing. So if you're going to do full-length battens, particularly as the boats get bigger, you need to address these compression loadings. You need to have a receptacle at the forward end of the batten to contain the batten and keep it from pushing forward, usually attached to some sort of stainless steel universal joint that allows the batten to twist and toggle independently. And very often you need to have some sort of specialized cars or track to take care of the friction in raising or lowering the sail. And that's where you see all these aftermarket, Harkin bat cars and, Lumar and Frederickson. They all have tracks that you can put cars on, which reduce the friction of the whole thing and make the sail go up and down. So that's smaller boats, you can get away with it, but bigger boats, you got to have some sort of tracked system and have the special hardware to make it work.
We have a question from Teresa. We're looking at new sails for our J40, and we'll do some low-key racing on a large inland lake. we're leaving the Dacron world. What materials do you like for main and 140% Jenny? Do you like polyant?
Dimension polyant. Yeah, Dimension Polyant is one of the biggest sailcloth manufacturers in the world. They're one of the 3-4 biggies. We actually work with them extensively. They make great stuff, and they've got a bunch of good materials for this application. But as you look at sails and you want to think about any kind of better performance, it really comes down to one thing, and that is less stretch. The less a sail stretches, the better it holds its shape. I don't care whether it's a racing sail or cruising sail or anything in between. And so what you're looking for when is stuff that stretches less. And woven polyester, the Dacron world that you refer to. By the way, Dacron's a trade name. Nobody makes it anymore, but everybody remembers woven polyester as Dacron. Those materials are relatively stretchy. And so typically, if you want to sort of take the next step up the ladder of lower stretch, you need to go to some sort of composite construction. And that means, a tri-radial style sail as opposed to a crosscut sail. And it means that you have usually a laminate that's a sandwich, that inside the two exterior layers are some sort of really big fibers. Polyester, in the case of a 40-footer, would be perfectly appropriate. On a bigger boat, carbon or something lower stretch. But those big fibers are there to bear the loads. And by radiating the panels out of the three corners, you can more clearly mimic the loading patterns in a sail. And you can easily reduce the stretch by, 30, 40% in most directions. And that'll have a big impact on how well the sail performs both initially and, by the way, over time too. Remember, woven Dacron, it deteriorates pretty rapidly in terms of its ability to resist stretch, whereas most composites stay at a fairly high level over the course of their life. So polyester composites, Dimension makes a wonderful polyester composite, would be a great application for what you're talking about. If you want to go fancier, you can go fancier. The next step up is carbon, all right, and to have some sort of sail with where those big fibers in the composite aren't polyester, but they're carbon, because carbon stretches dramatically less than all that. And that's what a racing sail would be, or all high-end cruising sails, on big boats over, 60, 70 feet, they're all carbon composites. Right? That's the de facto standard, because polyester is just not strong enough when you get to that size range of loading. So the technology is not something unusual or crazy. It just, in a 40-footer, it's not nearly as important as it is in an 80-footer where the loads are off the charts.
All right, we're getting close to last call. We're going to take Bob Dunn's question. Talk about trimming asymmetrical Spinnaker and what the V on the sail is used.
Well, that's the V I always forget. And my clients say that, Dave, did we get some stripes up here? So an asymmetrical Spinnaker actually is amazingly easy to trim, because what you basically do is let it out to the lofts and you trim it back in an inch. That's the way we've been taught to trim sails and to reach forever. What happens and why the V is there is that at night, it's very hard to see the sail luffing or breaking along that leading edge. And by having a contrasting chevron up there, it just makes it easier to see. So it's a trim aid is all. But trimming an asymmetrical Spinnaker is actually pretty darn toot and easy compared to symmetrical. You don't have to worry about balancing, where the pole is relative to how hard the sheet is, to all that stuff. Especially if you have an asymmetrical Spinnaker on some sort of prod or spread. I mean, the tack goes down to the tack and the halyard goes up to the head, and you ease the sail out to the left and you trim it back in an inch. That's in a way you go. You might change the lead a little bit from reaching to running, where you move the lead forward by pulling down on the sheet with a twing. But the beauty of asymmetricals is they're very, very easy to use.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for the question, Bob and Teresa and Ron and everyone else who asked a question. We are out of time. I think, Dave, we should let you get on with your weekend, and we might have to bring you back because people have questions. And this is
sure.
a small but mighty audience tonight. So thank you guys for showing
Always
up.
happy to help. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
We'll be back in October. We actually have 2 dates in October. You can find them on the SpinSheet calendar. I don't know them off the top of my head. We've got this boat show in the way, and my brain is all wrapped around dates. But watch for SpinSheet and watch our Facebook page. We'll tell you all about them, and we'll tell you who our guest will be. And we'll bring Dave back soon, because Dave, you're the best.
Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Chris. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. I'm going to put you guys in the studio. Stick around for the party.
Have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks.
Before we go, I got to do one last thing, and that is thank Mount Gay for sponsoring this episode, and of course for Dario to be making an appearance again and make his signature cocktail, which the recipe again can be found at the very top of the comment section. So anyhow, pick up a copy of SpinSheet, and you'll find the next episode will be in there. In the October issue, we'll tell you when the next episode will be. So until then, be safe, get out on the water, and have yourself a great weekend. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Chris.